Hi there, folks. Nice to see you again. We've got a few in again today. Welcome to the second of our extended live Q&A sessions. This is me unscripted in real time. If you're watching right now, Thursday afternoon down in Cornwall at HQ. And I'm going to go through a few bits and pieces focusing on the current Xone range. We've been looking around for a few things we'd like to chat to you about, or you'd like us to talk about. And one of the things we see coming up quite often are questions on the sound cards for the Xone mixers. How you get the routing to and from them, how you can check they're working. So a few things we see with people sending us a bit of information about an application, Live or Traktor, and not too many other details about issues they're having, where you might look. So I'm going to run through what might be for some of you some quite basic setup and troubleshooting steps. So excuse me for those of you who know your way around the sound cards. This might not be a session for you. Pop your questions in the comments anyway, by all means, and we can look at those in future sessions. Or stick around, you might learn something. You might teach me something if you spot me going astray, and use it as a point of future reference. What I'll show you, I think, is one of the things which possibly confuses everybody, possibly me as well, if I get my screen sharing right a minute, is to look at the user guide, and what you'll often see is people getting us questions a little bit confused by what we give in our user guides. And looking at it like that, it might not make a lot of sense to some of you. So I'm going to walk you through it on a Mac and on a PC. So you've got visual point of reference for what you should and expect to see, and hopefully translate some of this into something a little bit more meaningful for you. In essence, just to cover this quickly, sound card inputs and sound card outputs can get a little bit confusing with the Xones, because some of the inputs to the sound card are inputs to the mixer, some of them are outputs from the mixer, and vice versa with the sound card outputs. So we try and give you what that means here, and appreciate that isn't too easy for many of you to follow. So I'll close that down again a little minute, and we can get back to walking you through some setups. I'll start with a Mac because it's relatively straightforward. I've got a 9.6 hooked up to this computer, and before I go into Traktor, Ableton, or any of my DJ software that I might want to use, I just want to check that the device is connected and working okay. Also, if you're using one of the doors, you get some issues or something doesn't seem quite right with the sound. People talk about things cutting in, cutting out, can't quite understand what's going on in the app. So the first place to look is here in the audio MIDI setup view of a Mac. You get that through Finder, Applications, Utilities, and once you've got it in, it'll bring up a view of the audio and MIDI devices. So you can see here I've got Xone 96 appearing as an audio device. It's connected to USB 2 input on the back of the mixer, and you can see there this is it as a MIDI device. So I know that that computer is connected to my 96. The 96 is powered on. These little icons here, for those of you that aren't familiar, are just indicators to denote that I have got the 96 configured as a default sound input, a default sound output device for my Mac. And that means that if I'm using a browser, something like that, a generic application like Apple Music, that will output the audio through my 96 mixer via the USB connection. Now, if you want to know where the sound comes out, it will generally default to what the settings are on the Mac. So down here you can change that or reset it. Each of the controls or Soundcard channels that you can see here won't do anything for you in this display. Kev, yes, basically the same principles here for the DB4. You'll need drivers installed on a Mac and a PC for DB, as it's not class compliant, but the principles for the routing are more or less the same. So for my 96, if I look at the configure speakers, you can see this is a stereo setup on the Mac, and it will default to channel 1 left and channel 1 right. Now on the Xone 96, that's the first channel on the mixer, and that would have me set USB 2 as my input source on the top of the channel of the mixer. I can select any of those outputs from the Mac into the mixer, and my normal default for listening to something as an aside would be to use one of the aux inputs. So I might select channel A left, channel A right, apply that, and that will now mean that if I'm any web audio, generic, as I said, Apple Music, stuff like that, that will come out to me on channel A input of the 96 when I select the USB 2 source switch. It's not the same settings as for the DAW, and I'll go on to a couple of those checks in a moment so you can see. But just to move on briefly to the MIDI, this is where the 96 exists as a MIDI device, and any of our current range you would also see. So you can see here dulled out, PX5, K2, 23C, 43C, devices that are previously connected. And just if I want to check that the MIDI is working okay on this interface, before I open my doors, do any mapping, try and get some control, what I want to do is just use the local test. So if I click on that, you can see it'll highlight it. If I use this test here, and if I start to, you can see hopefully the little icon there is showing that I'm pressing something with a MIDI control that is connected to the 96. Now in this case it's a K2 connected to the Xlink socket, just so I can show you that kind of everything works the way we expect it to. If you press the outgoing one, that will illuminate LEDs on the MIDI device, like the 9.2. You'll see QLEDs and bits and pieces like that flash. If you've got a K2 connected, you should see some of the LEDs on that flash. The partner is something we'll cover in another session, but essentially the partner is the MIDI input and output to the USB 1 sound card on the mixer. So you can use this to talk between the two computers connected to the 96, sending MIDI information. So we'll cover that in another session in a little bit more detail. This is an overview of the sound card routing, but this should give you an idea that your Xone mixer is connected, that you can route audio out of it, and that the MIDI is working okay. So one of the things, if you've been in touch with us before, we might ask you to do is just check that you've got some simple tracks running before you go into your DAW. Say we'll ask you to play a YouTube track or a track from Apple Music. Make sure that you've got these settings in place. As I say, by default it would come out of channel 1 on your mixer. If I show you, before we go into any DAWs, a similar setup, but this time I'm going to use a PC. There's a few differences, obviously, and one of the things we've noticed is that Windows 11 is actually showing some quite nice user-friendly options for audio settings and stuff like that. So if I just give you a basic overview of the settings in Windows and also the device manager, which you can get to by just typing in the search bar down there. Again, it's a 96 connected, and this is useful for checking that everything's working okay. In the device manager, it just shows the hardware connection. It'll show you audio inputs and outputs. As you can see, it's showing me aux1, aux2, and all of the inputs. These are stereo pairs, so that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 if you were looking at the user guide, and then it shows the outputs as well, 1, 2, 3, 4, and A and B. So this is reassuring me that the connection is good, the device is all being recognized. You can see it down here as well. It appears as a sound, video, and game controllers device. So it's available for using for streaming, web viewing, bits and pieces like that. And then you can see here, this is its existence on the USB system. It's a USB audio device, and the PC is recognizing it there. If you've got problems with the connection or problems with the interface, you might expect to see an exclamation mark or some notice here that things aren't right. Say a little exclamation mark down here might indicate some problem with the connection. Which side of the connection it is something else to troubleshoot. But this is the first place to have a look on a PC. If you want to configure the sound from your PC in a similar way to a Mac, so I want to listen to YouTube through my mixer, you configure that in the sound settings here. Again, you can type that in the search bar in Windows 11 and go through System Sound once it's connected. Again, Windows 11 now shows me quite nicely all of the inputs and outputs are available for me, and I can select which ones I want to use. So again, at the moment you can see that is channel 1 on the mixer's input, so that's an output from the USB sound card, input to the mixer. And my default from the Mac previously, I would set output A. I like to listen to the aux channel on the left. It seems to make most sense to me. You can put it wherever you like, and if you're using other things in the mix, you can add a audio stream directly from your computer into another channel, so bring some other audio sources into the mix, which is where this becomes quite useful with Windows 11, giving you a bit more functionality here. On the input, again, Windows 11 will now give you the ability to connect from any of the USB outputs on the mixer, inputs to the computer. So at the moment you can see I've got as a default the aux2 main, which would give me my left-right mix from the 96 into an application or wherever I want to route it on the PC side of stuff. And you can see down there I've got the mix output running some audio on the mixer at the moment just for checking levels, and you can see that's coming there as an input to the mixer. So I'm reasonably confident now. Everything is connected, plugged up, it's all working, and I'll move on to some settings within the applications. Again, the routing from the back of the mixer that you might be physically plugging something into your DAW for sampling or timecode, stuff like that, and then back out of the software into the mixer. Just see a few questions coming up here. Ambient, it's Al here, product specialist, ANHHQ. Any other questions? Audio sync out news. I'll show you a use for audio sync shortly as part of one of these USB settings. It's not strictly speaking part of our USB architecture, so I won't be covering it in any great detail, nor will I be covering or addressing DB4 questions. But I will move back on now to go through some DAW settings, and we'll go through the most common ones. I'll start again with a PC, and probably the most commonly used app for everybody is Traktor with one of our mixers. JL, yes, I am talking about the 96 in this particular context, but the same fundamental principles you should be able to apply if you are using a PX5 or if you're using a 43C. Doesn't apply in quite the same way with the 23, but more or less in terms of device checks and stuff. If we've got enough interest or enough questions, we can review some of those in a little bit more detail. At the moment, I've got the 96 set up because it enables me to show you the Mac and the Windows setups connecting to the same mixer. So hopefully on screen now you can see Traktor set up on a PC, Windows 11. The preferences up. Traktor will auto select the 96 when you first connect it, or it will give you a prompt to recognize it's been connected, and you can say yes or no, remember the settings, so that each time you're connecting Traktor with the interface online, it will hook straight into it, and it will either apply some default settings or it will remember any settings you make and change. So the default settings, ambient, I can see already. Which sample weight do you recommend for using Traktor? It's one of the things I'm going to go back to, if you don't mind. We don't recommend any one in particular. As you can see here, this one is defaulting to 44.1. I don't really have a problem in general use having it set at 44.1. The reasons you might want to set it higher is lower latency. It will depend on how well your computer is able to run at faster processing speeds. But if you're working in a studio environment, sort of recording something for streaming, I might select 48K, possibly because it's something of a default studio setting considered from sort of old early digital days. 88.2 or 96 if you're doing a lot of audio processing and you've got a very capable computer, or you want to do some particular recording sessions, you might go for 88.2 or 96. There isn't a hard, fast rule for that, which is why I'm being a little bit non-specific about the answers. And the same applies for buffer sizes. But again, let me get through the I/O routing for you, and we can revisit some of the nitty-gritty in the preferences later or another time. Yeah, if you want to do a lot of post-processing compression, yeah, you could go up to 96K exactly. It's a kind of recording higher definition. But if you're using for DJ, bear in mind, if it's live and you're playing out into a club and you're mixing for home or even mixing for streaming, the compression that might go down the line for something like that, and in all honesty, how carefully people are listening in club environments, means that the qualitative issues relating to sample rates and stuff are slightly different considerations for a DJ. It would be more about latency and how much audio you want to process, stuff like that. I digress. Let me get back to the I/O. As we said, the output routing in Traktor defaults to the setup, which is on the mixer, deck A and deck B in the two center channels, channel 2 and channel 3, and C and D onto channel 1, so the leftmost stereo channel, and channel 4. That's kind of a traditional adaptation of the typical classic 2 decks, 2 CDJs setup, controlling your decks in the middle and the CDJs on the outside. And the really nice thing about this, and one of the reasons I wanted to show you, is that you can do what you like with that. This is a default. If you would like to have your setup a different way around, this is fully flexible. So if I wanted to output deck A on channel 1 of the mixer, I just select those channels. I can also select the same USB channel to output more than one deck on. That can be quite useful if you do want to sum mixes from different applications. You might have some sample tracks going on, or some MIDI outputs from another application that you want to mix with something from a deck or a CDJ or the decks from Traktor. If I have 2 decks Traktor mixing, but I've also want to do some vinyl or a couple of CDJs that have got analog sources, I can do that by summing my decks here into one channel and then mix in the box with Traktor and have more spread out across the 9.6. So these don't necessarily have to be fixed to the channel inputs and outputs you might assume. I can see a few questions coming in, so bear with me while I just have a look at you. Use both booth or master out channel for recording. Would there be a degradation to the signal? No, there wouldn't really. It's the same signal paths on the booth and the master out, slightly different sources where you might be tapping that from. Sound quality is great. Using the master out for recording, if you're using an external device, I would use the record out on the RCAs on the back. If you want to record over USB, which is kind of something we know a lot of you ask about and is perfectly doable, I would either be using the USB to excuse me, the USB 1112 master out option, which is a switch on the top panel, or if you were already using 11 and 12 for sends to something else, I would use a spare input channel to the USB card connected from the record out or the audio sync. So let me kind of show you that if I can here with the PC setup. So just to recap, I have got output coming into channel 2 on the mixer, output coming into channel 3 on the mixer, channel 1 on the mixer, channel 4 on the mixer, and the effects returns coming out on channel A. My input routing for the equivalent for that is at the moment set up like this. There's a reason for this, is I can show you some DVS inputs. My input for deck A, if I match it with the output, would be channel 2 left and right. If I have a turntable physically connected to the mixer and I want to use that for DVS control, and I have the turntable physically connected to the channel 2 inputs, that's the source I want for my DVS on this deck. Now, if my deck is connected, I have phono selected on the rear panel switch as the USB source. You would see metering come up here once you put the needle down on the record. Now, what I'm going to do is a slightly different setup. I'm going to show you how you can use this for different configurations as well. So I've actually got a turntable connected physically to the channel 1 inputs on the mixer. To equate that to the sound card, that would be channel 1 left. There you go. You can possibly hear that in the background, that annoying little whine from the time code. You can now see that's coming in there when I select channel 1 left. If I can perhaps show you the 96 rear panel, then you can see what I mean, where it is on the mixer. Give me a second while I get the right screen up. And I'll show you here. So connected in on channel 1 phono left and right here, my turntable is physically connected. The switch down here is my USB source. I have that selected for phono so that it takes the RIAA level signal onto the USB card. This would be the same channels, channel 1 left, channel 2 right. That's channel 1 on the mixer. That would be the line input source. And then these are, if you're looking at the view on your application, this would be channel 3 left and right, taking a phono input, channel 3 left and right, line input. As you go down there, this would be channel 4. Sorry guys, I'm confusing myself here. This is channel 3 left, channel 3 right, phono, channel 3 left, channel 3 right, line. You might see that described as, let's see, where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the USB card channels on the total count. 9 and 10 on a 96 equates to the send 1, 2 outputs and the send pot on the top of the mixer, available pre and post fade. The 11, 12 channels are either send 2 or they are your master output, and that is the same signal on the master 1, on the record and the booth. It is also available there on the audio sync out. I hope you can follow that okay. And that's all making sense for you. I also hope that you're following my screen changes okay. But I'll go back to the Mac. Sorry, I won't. I'll go back to the PC and I'll continue to show you these inputs. So that's the left-hand connection of a turntable connected to channel 1 on my mixer. If I select right-hand side for that input, you'll see both the channels there come up, and you also notice, hopefully, Traktor is showing that as the timecode signal. If I pull the needle up, pop it back down, you can see he's working okay on there. And I can sync and loop that with some audio from the other deck playing without a turntable. This input is physically connected to channel 1 on the mixer, but it will still output the deck's audio into channel 2 of my mixer. So if you can follow any of this thinking, you don't have to physically connect your turntables or your CDJs to the channels that you want to control your audio for, or that you want to route into. So swap them around to your own preferences. If you've got an install or you're going into a club where decks and CDJs are already plugged up, but you like your layout on the mixer to be a different way around and you're using software, this is where you can do all of that. Now the input routing in Traktor's got a couple of other interesting aspects to it that some of you might not be familiar with, or familiar with how you can set them up on our kit. So if I disconnect that for a moment, and I'll just turn that timecode off. One of the other things you can see here is that my input deck D assignment I've set to send to left and right, or master left and right. So that's the 11 and 12 sound card channels, and they route either the send to from the mixer or the master left right. In this example, I've got the master right switch on the top panel enabled, and the metering you can see here is this audio in the mixer. I can keep that audio playing. You'll see that coming in on the channel meter on channel 3, and that will come out of the mix output. So this is I want to record my mix essentially scenario, and what I do here, I'm not using the input for deck D as timecode. In this example, I'm going to suggest I've got a timecode on deck A and B for vinyl control, and then C and D, as I said, I've got some media players. I would use the local control in the app for the physical manipulation of the files and stuff, and the audio would still come from the analog outputs of the CDJs or media players, whatever you're using. So that means I've got inputs here on the USB card that are unused. And for Traktor, if I take the master left right sound card option, I can then use that for my mix recorder. External input, at the moment I've got that set to C. If I select input deck D, come over here, if you can follow my mouse, you will see the signal coming in on Traktor's recorder. So that's the output, it's a mix output from the 96 being recorded over the USB back into Traktor. Quite a useful little way of keeping your recordings going. Anything you've got going on in the 96 will be picked up there from that master bus output. The other routing that we've got here in Traktor is the input effects send. I've got that set to send one left, send one right, so that's 910, and that will give me the physical control on the pot if I route Traktor's effect as a send effects and then return it to channel A left and right. That is essentially using Traktor's FX1 engine the same way I'd connect up an external effects pedal. Let me have a couple of questions here. Which is Traktor S8, Traktor 4D at the same time? Is there a way? Yeah, I might have to look into that one for you. I imagine the short answer would be yes. Somebody's already given you a bit of an answer, but I want to use audio only as Xone. Is in use. I plan to change it to Mac. I'm not quite sure I'm following that question, so I'm going to carry on walking through this setup and hope you can keep up with me. Where was I? Output effects return. So I can use now my Traktor effects to send to and from the mixer via an aux send and return channel, like I would do with a pedal and stuff like that. The other thing maybe we quickly look at in Traktor is the controller manager, where you might have your mappings and stuff set. So a generic MIDI would be a default map, and then on your inputs here, Xone 96 I want for this, that's the device I'm connecting to, and I have a K2 connected to the Xone. Still the input and the output port is the 96. That's the physical USB connection that it's seeing the MIDI signal on, and it's outputting through that same device as well. If I show you up here, The little K2 I've got plugged in. If I start moving that around, you can see some of the controls, and this one is mapped over there on the far top left of the screen. You'll see the dry wet control being used. So that's X-Link MIDI through the 9.6 USB. If I wanted to control this PC from the Mac that I've got connected to the 96, I'd be selecting the partner one. That's a different rabbit hole, so we'll talk about that in another session. And I'm going to move out of Traktor now as well, because a little bit mindful of the time moving on. I'm going to show you quickly live setup, so that you can see we have both going on at the same time. In live, preferences is where I set up the sound card. On the PC, it's an ASIO device, and you should see the Xone 96 ASIO driver there. Input configurations and output configurations will come up. And for something like this setup, I think you might have seen it covered in some discussion on other products, is my default is 9, 10, 11, 12, which are my aux sends. If I had a PX5, you'd see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 9, 10 is your effects send. So I'd have that one. Okay, that. And my output config, 9, 10, 11, 12. I tend to set the others off, or, you know, safety's sake, really, so that it don't accidentally route audio in two different directions. And this is a setup that I use for VST effects alongside Traktor or something like that. Use it alongside analog inputs as well. So just 9, 10, 11, 12 I have as inputs. Just 9, 10, 11, 12 I have as the outputs. The reason that I've left 1 and 2 there, you'll see in a minute in the Traktor, in the live session. MIDI here, all the MIDI ports. If I want remote control from a device, I'll turn those on. Partner there is only going to be any use to you if you physically got another computer connected. So it would be the device I've got connected to USB 2 in that case. That's the Mac. And this is my output. So those are my default settings for one mixer connected here. Will give me MIDI in and out. If I want to use sync, I'll turn that on as well. So if I'm using the MIDI out on the 96 that I want to sync to a device connected to that, I want to sync the output here. Then once I go in live into the session view for my audio ins, where I'm going to use as sends for the effects, I take my external input. From 910, that's send 1. I take this external input, 11, 12. You can already see that because the 96 there, it's tapping the mix bus, and I've got audio running on that, so you can see the metering there. If I turn up, let's have a look. If I turn up some send 1, there you go, it's a bit loud, but you can see the metering coming there. That's the send 1 control on the 96 turned up. If you were using a PX5, be the sends on that, you'd see switch to the effects option for your USB. And if I once I want to route it into live, monitor the inputs, brings that up on the channels. And then what I tend to do for these is route them to sends only, put my effects units over this side, and then output these to the corresponding channels on the mixer. So it's coming in from 910, send 1 on the mixer. It's routing to just one of the effects channels and back out on 910, which is input A. External in there from 1112 or send 2, going to sends only. External out, I put that on 1112, that will be coming in on channel B on the mixer. And again, as I said, in Traktor, you can sum these into the same channel. So I could have a whole bunch of effects all outputting on channel A of the mixer, and some other stuff outputting on channel B. I could output onto, if I've got it set up, 1 and 2 of the mixer and bring it in on a stereo mix channel. Might want to use the 4-band EQ. I could bring samples and clip sessions or something like that in here. And you can do all of these either summing in the box and outputting via one stereo pair, or discretely. It kind of depends on how many channels you want to make use of in the mix, which is why I was discussing possibilities for routing 2 decks out of 1 mixer channel. So you can kind of start doing stuff like this. What we'll do in some future sessions is to show you through physical setups of some of the application examples you can see in the quick start guides. So some of those are we might consider quite basic setups. Some of them are a lot more complex. We'll have some future sessions where we walk you through those, the physical setup, actually plugging up the cables and stuff, and then showing you how the signals route. Before we move off or on, I'll show you the last point I wanted to cover on a PC is applications like some of the freeware stuff that people are using a lot at the moment for streaming, capturing and recording. I can see a few questions coming in there. Apologies, I'm not answering them on the fly. Some of those I will get back to you after the session. Heath, what's the max input level for the Xone? I plan to have 2 decks and 2 Eurorack synths, 10 volt PP. You'll find with Eurorack stuff coming in on a live line input onto the 96. There's quite a lot of gain on those channels. You shouldn't have any problems getting signal into the mixer. You can see the specs for the 96, page 35 of the user guide. 36, you'll see all of our specs listed there. Download those from the product page of our website, www.alan-heath.com. I'll give you a little bit more detail on that as a reply after the session. But as I was saying, what I wanted to show you here, that's another one we see common questions for. People want to record their sets into something like Audacity is a common one. How do they do it? A few problems in that. On a Windows PC, Windows 11 now, that would be my short answer to you, because you can now pick any of the inputs that the computer can see, the application can now see. So again, if I wanted to record the mix from my 96, I'm going to select this one, aux2 main to Xone USB 1. It lists it slightly differently in each app, which can be confusing, but as you look down them through input 1, input 2, input 4, aux 1, aux 2, input 3, hopefully you can figure out which those are. They're stereo pairs. We say, if I take that one, that takes the main output or the send to output. So for a mix recording in here, I set my mixer's top panel option switch. Excuse me, I just lost it somewhere down the back of there. To the mix left right option, and as soon as I hit record in here, let me have a quick look, see what I've actually got anything routed in the mix. Not a great deal. I'll stop that again. Get that back up for us. Let's go record again. Oh, perhaps we'll get rid of that one and start again. Not going to be a great signal, is it? Let's turn some channels up. It's sod's law, eh? When you've set it up all beforehand and everything works swimmingly. I'll go and fiddle with that later, but trust me, it does work. This will be the channel you want for your input. That will be recording the mix output on the mixer. You've actually got audio you can hear and monitor and stuff. That'll all be good. The same is the case for OBS. And as you can see here, I've already set up the left-right mix output as a source into OBS, and it's happily seeing the signal for me. Press record. It will give me other options as well. If I want to select a different input, I go into the properties and you will see again each of the inputs is available to me. I hope that's of some use to you. I want to show you the Mac as the next one, because there's a little bit of a difference, and this will probably be the last point I cover before we leave you. So with something like OBS or Audacity on a Mac, you don't have quite so much control over the inputs of the mixer. Whilst you can view the inputs and see them all there, Mac's Core Audio doesn't give you a great deal of control over them. So an application like OBS or an application like Audacity will default to the first two channels of the device you've got used. So generically, that would be your built-in mic, takes a left and right, or a line input, or the mic signal. So it's two channels is what a Mac's used to seeing. When you connect something like a 96, it will still want two channels, or assume two channels is what you're using for recording, and it will default to 1, 2, which is, if you were here for the whole session and have kept up with it, that is the physical RCA inputs on the back of the mixer into channel 1, line or phono. Not very useful if what you want is the mix output that we've just been talking about on the USB. So the short fix for this, and we've told a lot of you before, we know it works, is to use a jumper cable connecting in to the line inputs on channel 1 on the mixer, selecting the line input as your USB source, and you want to take that input from either the record out on the back of the mixer, so you use a stereo RCA cable, or connect it from a mini stereo jack on the audio sync socket. So you can take the audio sync to line in 1 and 2 and use that as your Mac's input source. That will give you a setup for Audacity recordings, OBS streaming, stuff like that. In the typical DAWs that we use more frequently, as I say, Traktor, again, the basic fundamentals are the same as with a PC. So the outputs here are the inputs into the mixer. Channel 1 left, channel 1 right is the channel 1 stereo channel on the mixer. 2, 3, 4. So this one you can see I've got it set up A, B, C, D from left to right across the mixer. Nothing else connected. Internally, that's irrelevant, and external, sorry, my input routing is where I'm going here. Not connected to any of it. There's my input deck D. I'm using the spare input. I'm sourcing channel 1 left and right. So this is where I've got my little mini jack cable plugged into the line inputs on channel 1, so that I can go to the mix recorder, select an external mix, input from deck D, sourced from channel 1 left right, working back through the cable path, taking the mix output. Controller manager, same again in Traktor for Xone and Xlink and stuff. It would be a generic MIDI device you're adding in Traktor, and then to control it, your ports are USB 2, my Mac is connected to, so that's the main one. If I wanted to control it from the session I've got going on the PC, I input from the partner. If I want to send to the other session, I output to the partner. Normally, if I want the LEDs on the K2 that I'm using to light up, stuff like that, I'm outputting to USB 2 as the default. And that would also enable me to send MIDI on the 5-pin DIN socket on the back as well, coming from this computer. So I hope that has given you some information you can use as a point of reference. I hope you can maybe go back and review any of that. If some of it was unclear or I was rambling along to myself for too much of the time, then let me know, ask me some more questions. I think the next session we're going to do in a month's time will be covering a bit more of the analog I/O, so the physical connections. Some of the ones I've been talking about and not showing you. A basic setup. We're going to cover gain, how to get the levels right, whereabouts those want to be setting. We'll be talking about filters in a future sessions and running through some of the quick start guide setups as well. So, as I say, any questions you've got on anything I've said over the course of the last hour, please let us know. Anything we didn't cover that you'd like us to, apologies for that. Pop the questions in. And any future ideas that you've got for these live sessions or more detailed sessions, something we record and prepare for you in advance, keep dropping them in the comments. We are still seeing them all. We'll be getting more and more active as the year goes on and we're allowed to get out and about. And yeah, thanks for your company, everybody. Does the 96 work natively with Ableton? iTimmy 101, yes it does. If you have a look back through this video, you'll see me walking through the setup, how you can see it. It'll work on a Mac or a PC. It's a core audio device on a Mac. It's an ASIO device on a PC. I say, if you have a look back through this stream, you'll see me walk through some of the basic settings. It is one we'll cover in more detail as a sort of specific session live, routing, MIDI, bits and pieces like that, some other devices. That'll be in one of the quick start guide setup reviews. Don't think it'll be the next one. So we're going to look at the analog plugging up for those of you who really aren't sort of new to this. And for anybody who's kind of just looking at this going, what are you on about? I know all of this. Apologies for that. There's a lot of people out there who are quite new to this. The last couple of years has brought them into the DJ scene. Last couple of years has made them commit to that investment of a DJ mixer or a sound card enabled mixers that they've always been looking to, but they're still scratching their heads a little bit. So that's what today's session was aimed at. And again, we welcome your ideas for what you'd like us to talk about. And the better the questions you ask, probably the better my sessions will get. So on that note, I say goodbye one and all and see you sometime in March. Take care, yeah?